Can I Be Me, everyone? What an incredible film. Make some noise. So we're about to get into the Q&A, so let me welcome to the stage for the second time the director of the film, Nick Broomfield. Now, guys, we're going to be putting some questions out. We're taking questions from the floor, so if you're interested in asking any questions, then you'll see that there's microphones on the left and the right-hand side. So please, form an orderly queue, first come, first serve. That's going to be happening after our social media questions. So microphone there, microphone over there. Oh, I can see some keen people already. That's good. So, Nick, you can't talk about Whitney without combining the amazing talent with a troubled soul. How did you manage to strike the balance in the film?
Well, I think it was really when we found this treasure trove of Rudy's footage that I realized just how amazing her performances are. Because I think in '99 you could see it wasn't so easy for her to hit those notes. But it's like every time she goes out there, she just pushes it absolutely to the limit. You can just see. And I think that really moved me so much, because she was like so generous, I think, on stage, as generous as she was off stage. And I think that emotion was kind of like a guiding thing when we were editing it and putting it together. I felt she was so vulnerable and so kind of giving in her performances. And I think we tried to really reflect that in the film and not just get into... Some of the films that were done after she died were so negative and judgmental, and I thought very unfair. So we tried to balance it and I think celebrate an amazing artist.
And you're right, she really gave those performances where, on a physical level, you could see her just giving it everything.
Yeah, she was like a gladiator out there, sort of sweating and straining to get it out. I can't think of anyone so amazing on stage, really. It's very, very moving. We were very moved making the film.
Now, you teamed up with music video director and filmmaker Rudy Dolezal on getting access to unseen footage from 1999, the World Tour. Tell us about your working relationship that you shared with him.
Well, it was, first of all, mainly kind of convincing Rudy that I was a worthy recipient of this amazing footage that he shot. And it's really the most intimate footage I've ever seen of, Whitney. She was a very private person, so it was very rare for her to let anyone in. As far as I know, Rudy was the only one. And I think a lot of people had offered him a lot of money in the past to give them his footage. So I have this great archivist called Lisa Savage, who's actually Australian. She flew over from Australia to meet Rudy and convinced him that it was worth meeting with me. It had been a long time finding him. And she said her great tip was, Rudy really loves good French red wine. Bring a couple of bottles of wine with you when you come. So we met early in the morning, and Rudy immediately wanted to get into wine. Well,
So you took some good wine.
We took some good wine, and we had an amazing conversation after that. And Rudy and I worked out a way in which we were going to work together. And so right from the beginning, I feel we celebrated Whitney. And I think that was what Rudy wanted more than anything, to feel that somebody who really wanted to tell the real story was going to get his footage. And it's worked out very well.
Because he wanted to make a documentary himself, didn't he? And he didn't want to simply have footage for, archive use.
Yeah, he wasn't an archivist, yeah. And I think Rudy had a very difficult time, because immediately after the '99 tour, Whitney went through a very troubled period. And I think he had tried to meet with her, and, she was very inaccessible at that time. So I think he felt that some of his greatest work was in this film, and he, wanted to make sure it was going to be used properly.
Now, we know that she had an incredible voice, but, after making this film, was there anything else that really struck you as very unique about Whitney?
I think she was a remarkably honest person. I mean, a lot of those interviews really surprised me, just how honest she is, even when she's completely vulnerable talking about her drug problem. And I think people like Patty Howard, who were also were in gospel choirs, who was incredibly close to Whitney, who was a Christian, said that, Whitney really went through hell trying to get off drugs, and that she was so in pain about how judgmental people had been about her. And I realized that sometimes I, too, have had it's very easy to write somebody off because they're having a hard time on drugs or something. And I thought this film, in a way, was more than just, it was also a film about our incredible intolerance for addiction and that kind of thing. Because, she was the brunt, I'm trying to say, of all those late-night talk shows, the Jay Leno's, the Letterman's, who she was fair game for really kind of bad jokes. And I think she took it really personally, and it made it very difficult for her, I think, to get over her problems.
I think that's what was interesting for me, kind of seeing certain key points in her life and career that would have made life even more difficult, and just from a kind of just bringing compassion to someone's life and seeing what they might be going through in the behind the scenes rather than just the mess that everyone is kind of interpreting them to be.
Yeah, because I think she was so kind to so many people. And, basically her fortune went supporting a whole ton of other people. That's where her money went. So, I kind of identified very much with Patty Howard when she said, where's the generosity that Whitney had given the world? Where's the happiness that Whitney had given the world in terms of her when she's having such a hard time?
Now, when you were speaking to people for the first time, can you share with us some of the challenges that you faced coaxing out such personal information from her colleagues, confidants?
I think the thing is, people really loved Whitney, and the musicians just really loved talking about her because it sort of took them back in their mindset to playing with her. And she never did the same song twice. She would ad-lib completely, depending on her mood. And sometimes, Kirk Whalum, the saxophonist, would just do a particular riff, and she'd just go off, and they'd go off together, because they're all from, gospel. Yeah. So they just loved it, and they would just, and what a pleasure it was for them. Also, Kirk would say her voice was so powerful, no one had to worry about playing too loud. Wow. They could just belt it out, and she would just still go over the top of them. So they just had a blast with her. So they wanted to talk about it. In fact, they went on for hours. We would just sort of literally turn the camera on, and they would just be so happy to be back in that mind space.
Incredible. Now, we are taking some questions from social media. You're welcome to tweet us, #WhitneyLive. But we've got some in already. And Katie on Twitter has gone straight in, and she says, do you think that Bobby Brown was entirely to blame for the destructive path that Whitney took?
Well, I really don't. I mean, I think that was the line that everyone has been fed, but I think her problems started, very young. I think that they obviously had an amazing chemistry, and when you see that footage of them being Ike and Tina Turner, they're obviously having a lot of fun. I think that they probably were unable to sort of support each other through their respective addictions, and that was kind of the problem more.
Jamie from Cardiff asks, what was it about Whitney and her life that compelled you to put this film together?
That is a difficult one. I just don't know how to answer that. That's a difficult question. Maybe someone out there has got a better way of answering that question. It was so long ago that I decided to make the film. I just think she was an amazing icon who gave the world, herself basically, and her story needed to be retold.
How long did it take to put the film together?
It took 2 years, but 2 very hard years of work. I mean, working kind of every day and pretty, not much social life, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Now, okay, so we've got that. So Maria from Oxford asks, to what extent did gender and race play a role in Whitney's struggle and the public's judgment of her?
Yeah, I think a big, big thing. It wasn't like, she came from a very poor area, and in a way she was a ticket for everybody getting out of Newark. It was really, America it's a very tough place for, I made a film before about South Central. People just can't get out of South Central. So Whitney was kind of showed people this amazing world. She'd traveled with an enormous entourage of like 50 plus people. They met Mandela and all these incredible people and saw the world. So she was responsible for all these people's lives. And I think that was from being, from Newark. And I think also being a woman, it was much harder for her to, for example, I think it's very telling that she never kind of did her own music. And I think she was so used by the record company that, someone of Whitney's stature, I think there must have been so many musicians or composers who would have loved her to sing their songs. But she was just fed these songs by the record company. And I think, at a different time, in a different place, she would have been able to do her own stuff.
Yeah, as a woman in the industry with more power and
exactly.
autonomy. Christian from London asked, did Sissy, her mother, place too much pressure on Whitney, in your opinion, to succeed and become the groundbreaking vocalist that she never became?
Well, I think that's probably true, but probably also just so disapproving of all her relationships and, clearly disapproving of Robin and Bobby Brown. And I think, so in later years, Whitney went to live in Atlanta and was basically close to Bobby's family rather than her own, which I think was very tough on her.
Callie from Dublin asks, what were some of the qualities about Whitney that the world never got to see, do you believe?
I think she was so funny. You really get a sense of that, hopefully, in the film. I think she had an incredible sense of humor and comedic timing and this wonderful laugh. And I think that's why her friends loved her so much. She was just so fun to be with. Yeah, I think that was a very important part of her that you don't see with the sort of manufactured Whitney.
Okay, so questions from the floor. Who would like to ask Nick a question? We have a very brave man standing there.
Hello.
Hi, what's your
Hi
name?
there.
Where are you from?
My name's Dan, I'm from Sheffield. The question is twofold, really, and linked to the passing of other global superstars of late. It's been 5 years since Whitney's untimely passing, and in that time, other than repackaged greatest hits and compilation of live material, nothing's been released, which seems to stand in stark contrast when you think about Bowie and Michael Jackson and Prince's back catalogues. So I guess the first one is, do you think that there is anything in the vaults and it's just a problem with rights and record labels? And secondly, linked to those artists who have also passed, when people seem to talk about them in the press, it's about their legacy to music and about...
I'm completely the wrong person to ask this to. I haven't got a clue. I'm so sorry. I don't know about that.
So on this one then, why do you think, when compared to people like Bowie and Prince and Michael Jackson, she's more remembered for the drugs and the demise, whereas they seem to be remembered for their legacy towards music?
I think people were so disapproving of her relationship with Bobby Brown. I think there was a kind of vengefulness, which, is shocking, because I think she was so built up, by the media and stuff, and then so knocked down at the end. And, I think it was just, she became a very controversial figure, and she became fair play somehow.
Thanks.
Anyone else from the floor? Any questions?
Any other brave people?
If you have any questions, feel free to kind of form a queue behind each mic.
I don't think I'm tall enough for this.
Oh, bless you. Over on the right, if you can
Yeah, okay.
bring it down a bit.
First of all, thank you very much, Mr. Broomfield, or may I call you Nick, for such a brilliant film. I really enjoyed it. I found that you brought across a very positive person. Of course, there was a terrible downside. But my question, I think, would be the price of fame. I know it's a cliche, but it's from such lowly beginnings to such huge public knowledge or lack of it of her as a person. What, in your opinion, does that kind of fame, or did it do to her?
Well, I think basically she wanted to be Nippy, the person from Newark who sort of hung out with her friends, and all her friends said what she loved doing was slopping around in a tracksuit and watching lots of daytime TV and having a good time, And I think the extent of her fame, it really infringed on her privacy. I mean, it was amazing with a lot of the footage, for example, I was given all this other footage too, and it's like whenever she was outside, people would just constantly come to her for autographs and stuff. I mean, obviously not meaning badly, but it was like, wow, there's Whitney Houston. And I think it just became too much because she really just could not be herself, I think.
Well, I had sort of visions of Marilyn Monroe somewhere in there as well. She was more negative, I think, but thank you very much. I really
Pleasure.
Question from the left. What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Capella. I'm from the States. I think we can all agree that Robin really loved her. And I don't know if anyone believes that she left because she was paid off. And so I was wondering why you left that line in there, or is that something that you think really could have been the case?
What that Alison Samuels said.
She said Robin left. I don't know. Maybe she was paid off, but I'm sure her family was trying to pay her off much earlier than when Robin decided to leave.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Robin was obviously was kind of like the guardian angel on Whitney's shoulder, who for a very long time was incredibly loyal. And I don't know really I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know whether Alison Samuels was correct about that, or I think it was a supposition more than a fact.
Right. But I was just asking your decision as a director to leave that line in there. Do you think that was a possibility?
I think that Robin just decided to leave and to say nothing more about it. I think she was incredibly loyal to Whitney, and part of her loyalty has been to remain completely silent and separate.
And you've asked her, of course, if she would be part of this film, and did she refuse?
I didn't ask her myself. I got some of her friends. Well, she's very close to Patty Howard, and Patty Howard and her went. Funnily enough, she was the one who convinced Patty Howard to be in the film. So, and I've also talked to Patty since the film was finished, and I'm sure I will meet Robin at some point, but I haven't met her yet.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name's Kim. I'm from Manchester. Nick, I've got a question with regards to the research for the film. During your time researching the film, was there anything that you discovered, it's like a nugget of information which you proved to be true, that perhaps your lawyer said you couldn't put in because it was too juicy or something? If there was something you found out, what was it?
And that I'm going to share with you tonight.
It's not in the film. If there was something, what was it? And if there wasn't something, what was it?
It's got you there.
That's a tough one, isn't it? Maybe you should answer that one.
Well, there was this one time. No, I'm joking. I don't know.
No, I don't know how to answer. I mean, there is obviously stuff you leave out. I'm not sure if it's because it's so juicy or because sometimes it's just so complicated. I mean, one of the things I'd like to bring up, which I'm often asked, is, why is there nothing about Bobby Brown's battery or, charges of battery? And I think, the reason it's not in there is because I think everyone was pretty aggressive with each other in that particular group. It's like Sissy and Robin, Robin and Bobby, Bobby and Whitney, Whitney and Bobby, and Sissy smashed up John Huston's car with and David Roberts had to sort of get her off the car. So I think that there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. So I felt it was unfair just to single out one person. It was a big can of worms to. So that sort of thing was deliberately not in the film, but I can't think of a juicy nugget other than that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, this is a question more about, possibly more relevant to some of your other documentaries, but when you're making a documentary, you're constructing a reality because you film hundreds of hours of footage and you can't show it all. And you as a director have to be the person to select what gets shown. How aware are you while you're doing that you're not trying to sorry. How aware are you when you're putting the film together of your own bias and your own interpretations, and how much?
Well, I think what you have to do is try and be truthful to what you think is real. And in this film, I felt that the editor, Mark Hoffman, and I produced something that I really do think is close to the truth, with the emphasis that it should have. Like, i.e. not an enormous emphasis just going on and on about the drugs, but also really celebrating her talent. And I think, obviously, as a filmmaker, you want to be able to live with your film. I've made films in the past where I've always needed to go to the toilet at a particular point, which I know is because I can't stand that part of the film. And after a while, you don't want to make films like that. You want to make something that you can really live with, that you feel is as good and as truthful as you could possibly do. So,
thank you very much.
all right.
Hello, Nick. Thank you very much for a fantastic movie, especially for the Whitney fans. My question to you is the following. It seems as if the Whitney's family interviews with her family seems to be a bit lacking there. Were they part of the movie or the concept at the start?
Whitney's family were, well, I would say the estate have been very against this film for I think mainly for commercial reasons. And they actually sent emails out to everybody virtually who'd ever known Whitney saying, don't take part in Nick Broomfield's film, which at first I thought was going to be a terrible hindrance. And then I realized a lot of people felt the estate hadn't been that great with her, you know, particularly after, you know, she died and there were all those books and things coming out and selling off all her possessions. So I think it actually encouraged a lot of people to take part in the film. So you never know really what's going to happen. I would have very much liked to have had them in the film more than they are. I mean, I think you get a sense of the brothers, you get a strong sense, I guess, of Sissy. But really, it's really a film about Whitney.
Secondly, just quickly, do you know if there are any other movies? Do you know the family's planning to release something, a version of this that they sanction?
That's a family question, and I would not dare represent them.
Email Sissy.
Thank you.
Right, next, please. Thank you.
Hi, Becky from London. Nick, thank you so much. It was a very raw, moving, honest account of, you know, someone that the world knows, and it was beautiful to see your kind of connection with it. My question is, I guess, about similar to the lady before me's question in a way, the construction of the actual film, but more in relation to your own emotional growth through the 2 years and your emotional engagement with Whitney as a person and with the family. Did that, you know, did you go in knowing a lot about her? How much did it grow through the film? Was it through speaking with her family? And how did that affect the construction and the tapestry?
I knew very little about Whitney going into the film. And I obviously looked at whatever was out there, and then I started interviewing people who knew her very well. So I was guided by that. But I think for a long time we had a real problem making the film work. For a long time the film did not work at all, and I was very frustrated with it. It was kind of a very cold film. You didn't really feel, and I think what was missing was Whitney in the film. And I started, you know, working with Mark Hoffman, and Mark said, I think what we need to do is put Whitney in the film. We need to hear her voice. We need to emotionally be with her from the beginning of the film. And obviously, I think starting with I Will Always Love You, with that amazing performance where you just see how painful it is for her to give it, but also how beautiful it is when she gives it, kind of gets you onto her emotion. And I think you hopefully stay with Whitney right through the film. You know, and I think it was that difference, which actually took about 7 months in editing to do, that really changed the film. I think hopefully I felt very emotionally with her right the way through the film, and very moved by the end with what had happened to her. And I think that was what was missing for a long time. So I think film is all about moving people and empathy and compassion. And I think that was what we worked very hard to try and get.
Thank you so much. Just a brief, also, just to
sorry, we need to, because
about the family and
we've
their
got
reaction.
5 minutes, and so we need to just make sure we. But thank you. Next person, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Eleanor. I'm from Italy. Congratulations on the film. I really have a question about the film. There's been a trend with music documentaries coming back in, and I really want to know how you think your film compares to something like Amy, and then going back something like Don't Look Back with Bob Dylan.
Well, Don't Look Back is a wonderful cinema verite film, so it's obviously in a very different style, which I completely love it. I think it's one of my favorite films, shot by Don Pennebaker. I think it's just a completely brilliant film. Amy, I think, is a brilliant film too, but it's the detail of the films that's so different. I mean, Amy is from North London, sort of Jewish background. Whitney is from very tough Newark background. Her responsibilities for her people was completely different. So I think you can sort of blandly say this is a film about two rock stars who both, but that's such a generalization that it doesn't really mean anything. I think when you go into the specifics of the two of them, they're just very, very different stories. So I don't know about the trend, but I think they're different films.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kerry in Manchester. As somebody doing documentary making at university, do you have any advice? And also looking back at your previous work with like Tupac and with Kurt Cobain and now Whitney, it's very different genres. Is there another genre of music you'd like to go into?
Good question.
Gosh. Okay, taking the very first bit, I think, the main bit of advice I've got is if you want to make a documentary, you just have to go out and make one initially, not wait for all the funding to happen. Just borrow a camera, which is so easy to do today, and go out and try and tell a story. It's just about telling a story, really, and you'll discover quickly whether they're sort of semi-painful sometimes to make, before, and you will discover whether you really want to do it or not.
Thank you.
Great advice there.
Hi, I'm from Ipswich. Oh, my name's Bonnie. I was just wondering, because in the film I feel like it's really evident that Whitney surrounds herself with black people, and more specifically black women. And I was just wondering how you felt, obviously being a white male, creating the film, and whether you feel like Whitney would kind of be, I don't know, like happy and with the audience watching. Sorry, it's a bit of a confusing question, but...
No, it's fine. I mean, I think Rudy Dolitzel, who shot the most intimate stuff, was obviously white. I mean, Rudy has longer hair than me, but apart from that, we're both white males. And they were very close. I mean, you could see Whitney led him into the most intimate scenes, where she's crying coming off stage, where she's larking around with Bobby Brown. So I think it's about the empathy between two people. I don't think it's to do with whether you're white or black or male or female, really. I mean, I think obviously she surrounded herself with people she was comfortable with, but she was obviously comfortable with Rudy too.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Oliver from Luton. My question was, when did you sort of realize the power and responsibility as a filmmaker with the film? So when you started out the project or thought about the project, was it you sort of always had the vision to it to be a real sort of dramatic biopic, or was it just a generic idea?
Well, it's a big investment of time, obviously. 2 years was a long time, which I think was just to try and get it right. I found it a really difficult film to make, actually, and I hadn't really worked with that much archive before, and often I'd been a character in the film, and so this is a whole different way of telling a story. And, you're just a storyteller, really. But in this instance, I was telling the story through other people. So you had to kind of, in your subconscious, get so much information. Like, we did probably 80 hours of interviews, which I had to kind of remember. And then there was probably 100 hours from Rudy of his material, and then masses of other archive that we will. So it's a big stretch, you know, and you're constantly re-editing it and trying to get it right. So, yeah, it was just a very dense film, because you don't want to just make a biopic. You want to make something that's really special, that really gets to your emotions and feelings.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
I always think we should just applaud Whitney. I always feel so funny talking about her and not really thanking her. Yeah.
Now, we're going to be joined shortly on the stage by Michelle John, so I'm not sure how much longer their band need to get ready. But I just wanted to ask you as well, was there anyone that you didn't get to talk to that you wish you had of?
I think I guess I want to eventually meet Robin, but I think that's, you know, I didn't want to interview Clive Davis. I think it would have been a very painful interview. I don't think it was necessary.
What do you think Robin would make of the film? Have you had any feedback from her?
Well, you know, Patty has spoken to Robin, and I think, you know, Robin initially wanted to see a link. Then I think all her friends obviously came and saw it when it was at Tribeca and sort of said it was okay. And, you know, I showed the film to Patty, and I was, you know, much more worried about her reaction probably than I have been tonight, and this was pretty freaky. So, you know, because Patty Howard I knew was like so close to Whitney, and if she hadn't liked the film, I would have been very worried. But I think, you know, Patty is obviously talking to Robin a lot, and I think when the film finally comes out in the States, I will, you know, undoubtedly meet up with Robin at that point.
Is there anything that you would have done differently, you know, now that you've watched the film, I'm sure, many times? And endless showings to people who sometimes were incredibly critical of the film in the process. And I don't know how many cuts we did, but we did hundreds of different cuts. And then obviously we were getting notes from the BBC and notes from Showtime and probably, you know, notes from my family, you know. My son in particular, who was here earlier, I don't know if he's gone back. Oh, great.
Was particularly critical. So obviously you have to take that seriously, you know, particularly when your son's being critical. So, but it was all useful. It's all very useful to finally make something that you think is kind of there. And I think as a filmmaker, you're often too close to your work, and you need feedback from people. So I think the film we ended up with was the film we really wanted to do.
Well, congratulations. The film is out on the 16th of June. Whitney, can I be me, everyone? Thank you so much.
Thank you.